We're going to talk about cleaning disinfection and the aftermath from our COVID times. There's been a big impact. It was raised last year at the IGHC 2021 that the impact on turnaround times of the enhanced cleanings, it was quite a challenge for all of us. Now, the measures after pandemic are relaxing a bit. There are less things required. So I think this next discussion is about, is the cleaning disinfection still necessary? I'm going to welcome to the stage again Eva Pluakova, Head of Standards and Operations at IATA, who's going to lead and moderate the session, and welcome the group. Eva, welcome. Thank you.
Hello, is it still morning? Good morning. How many of you would like to sleep instead of sitting here? Hands up. How's the dancers? So, next session, our session is about, it's pretty much follow-up on last year in Prague. If you remember, we talked a lot about the additional measure we added to handling processes due to the COVID, additional measures in terms of aircraft cleaning, health check, and so on, which at the end up incredible amount of, or not incredible amount, but fair, good amount of time on turnaround. And David was one of the speakers who actually expressed concern that if we are continuing to do such an extensive measure, and especially if we are continuing doing the enhanced disinfection, which was requested by passengers, to reassure them of the safety on the board, as well as by regulators in different areas. If we recover travel and we stay with this amount of the measures, we will have a problem with our functionality, and we will have a delay on flights. So we have decided half an year later to do follow-up where we stand now. So let me introduce speakers. In the middle, David Overall, Senior Manager Policy and Procedures from United. And Derek Zimmerman, Vice President, Safety and Training, Airport Terminal Services. So we opted to invite David back because we would like to hear his perspective, but we also invited Derek because he's a handler side, and we would like to give you a perspective on one topic from different views because it's fairly interesting. With that, David, I would like to ask you to present your part. Thank you.
Thanks, Eva. Good morning, everyone. I know the last thing people really want to talk about anymore is infection, but I think it's a really important topic. I know everyone has fatigue from it, but there's a lot that we've learned throughout the pandemic relative to how we mitigate the risk for infection for customers, for our employees, and how critical that is in the long-term sustainability of the airline, right, in the event of another pandemic or another infection event. So really kind of moving into our slides, really what I wanted to talk about is kind of the evolution of testing from a United standpoint, or not testing, of disinfection from a United standpoint. Really, how did we begin? What technology did we employ? And what did we learn along the way? So I'm going to take you through a little bit of a journey here. And we really started sourcing, right? Understanding what was out there in the market, what methods were there to actually disinfect an aircraft, short of just hand wiping down every single surface on an airplane, which is extraordinarily time-consuming. How did we actually source, the materials and the technology to be able to distribute those chemicals? And what did we land on from the best method of dispersion on our end? So really what we want to start with is electrostatic spraying. And for those of you that aren't familiar with it, it can be either backpack mounted or actually a machine in the aircraft. And it's a really highly efficient process that basically functions using positively charged particles that are released from the electrostatic sprayer. And what that does then is those particles are attracted to the surfaces of the aircraft that are negatively charged. And instead of just a spray that gravity works to actually adhere to the surface, What this does is the negative surfaces attract the particles and then cause them to spread out along those existing surfaces to really ensure 100% coating of all of it, surfaces on the aircraft. It's much, much better spray penetration than from our own internal analysis, as you can see the 300%, than something that was simply an air blast or a fogging type of sprayer that relies on gravity. And you can kind of see the example over to the right. So it's like a pull of a magnet, if you want to think of it that way, that pulls the spray to it and again causes it to evenly distribute along the surface. And as mentioned, 75% or 75 times greater attraction of those particles in the air than gravity alone. So how does the electrostatic spray process actually work? From a aircraft turnaround and from a resource management perspective. So this is kind of the timeline of everything that we had to think about and put in place in order to make that kind of a reality. And the goal initially was to treat 100% of our aircraft turns with electrostatic spraying. So you can imagine the complexity that adds on top of everything else that happens in a turnaround operation, really thinking about how we weave this into and disrupt that flow as little as possible along the way. So I'm just going to kind of focus on the components between the safety cones. You can read the rest of it a little bit as well. But an important component of understanding the implications and the impact on our operation is what can't happen, right, during that safety cone period. So in essence, based on research and best practice and guidance from the chemical suppliers, we really didn't want anyone that wasn't actively involved in the spraying process in the aircraft cabin at all during the duration of that spray application, up until I think 2 minutes post completion of the spray. So a lot of coordination, certainly to get those cleaners on. You can see we had process where we contact our station operations control to notify all other parties, hey, you can't get on the aircraft during this time period. PPE, personal protective equipment, was obviously required for the person applying the spray itself. And then the ESS process starts with tray tables down, right, to make sure maximum adherence to surfaces that customers would actually touch on board the aircraft. And then working through that process, ESS completes and the safety cones and equipment that we're denoting do not board the aircraft move away. The important component to think about, and all of us that have worked in ground ops for years understand, all of the other activities, whether it be catering, whether it be additional cleaning, whether it be flight attendants boarding, whatever other activities happen to happen on board that aircraft. Maybe you have tech maintenance that's needed at a seat. None of them could be on the aircraft during that critical electrostatic spray period. So all of those activities that previously could happen concurrently now have to happen post completion of the ESS spray, and that really drove a lot of operational inefficiency for us. So that was fine when we were at 20% load factors back in mid-2020. But as we start to see passengers return, the pressure on our operation to be able to manage the turnaround in a more efficient manner really mounted dramatically. So through a lot of research on our own and a lot of industry best practice and dialogue with multiple groups, we determined that there are other methods, right, to secure and ensure the safety for our customers and employees on the interior of the aircraft that are outside of a per turn. So every single turn that we operated, for about a 6 or 8 month period, we had the ESS spraying applied on every aircraft. So you can imagine the amount of time that took. So really landing on a new application of a longer lasting coating called Zuno Microbe Shield. And what that allowed, it's a longer adhering product that actually would be distributed through the same electrostatic spray technique that I shared earlier. And what it did is, because of that longer lasting, it allowed us to eliminate entirely, through a process of research and verification and testing on aircraft surfaces for surface contaminants, virus, whatever else, allowed us to eliminate that entirely and instead go to a once per 7-day application of this antimicrobial shield. And a huge benefit to this, and I'll get to this in the next slide, is that it's totally water-based and non-toxic, obviously. We want to make sure that that's a component that we're providing for safety, both on the chemical side as well as the antimicrobial component. It creates a layer of microscopic pins, which when a virus or other microorganism lands on it, actually punctures the cell walls, effectively killing the organism and denaturing it and rendering it basically harmless to humans. This is an example of one of the devices that we're using to actually apply the spray on board of our aircraft. Again, I'll get into the timeline for this, but moving to a once per 7-day application versus every turn, right? We could then define when is the optimum time period to clean that aircraft so we don't see any operational disruption as a result. So this is used at our hub locations after a deep clean. The microbial shield needs to happen post a deep clean because they want to make sure we're not scrubbing any of that microbial coating off of surfaces that are subsequently cleaned. And so, again, as I talked about, right, de-peaking and de-risking our application of this solution became a critical focus. And as we started to see customers returning, we were seeing significant operational impact. And I'll get into the actual timelines and the time savings here in a minute. But again, this once per 7-day application really allows us to schedule that application out and define a period where the aircraft is going to have a longer sit on the ground. Typically, this occurs on overnight aircraft where we would have deeper cleaning missions anyway. And there still is the caveat that we can't have any other personnel on board the aircraft during the actual application itself. But this is happening in the middle of the night when really there are minimal to no other activities. It would have to be happening concurrently with that. So it's definitely been a learning process for us to make sure we capture and schedule and capture the application of that antimicrobial coating to those aircraft. But we're seeing close to 100% compliance at that 7-day interval to ensure that antimicrobial and risk mitigation for transmission of infection continues to be reduced. So what about the flight deck? Right? All of us understand there are very, very sensitive instruments on our flight decks, and we don't want to be applying any sort of spray that could potentially get into the actual physical flight controls. And one of the components that we really wanted to think about at United, and I'm sure elsewhere as well, is how do we protect all of our employees, to include those on the flight deck? Right? I think everyone understands if we have one pilot that gets an infection, how many passengers that impacts. So that was really a heavy focus for us as well. And really landed on UVC lights and application of the UVC spectrum light that actually kills any virus or bacteria. And that's done every night for aircraft that overnight at one of our hubs or one of our larger line stations. Additionally, what it also supports is there was a lot of concern from our cabin cleaning teams prior to bringing the UV light on, is wiping flight deck controls with rags. Again, very, very risky. You don't know what they might actually hit or actuate by doing so. So this was much more comfortable and an easier process for our cabin service teams to support, in addition to protecting the health and wellness of our pilot group. So this kind of walks you through the evolution, if you will, of our process from pre-pandemic all the way through to kind of current state of affairs. And I'm not going to drain this slide. There's a lot of information here. But kind of what I want to talk about is the pre-pandemic turn, right? What did we, MST, which for us means a minimum turnaround time, where you have very, very little time on the ground. What were our cleaning practices then, right? We didn't perform the full turn clean that we would on an aircraft with 2 hours of ground time. I think all of us understand the importance of being efficient on that turn process. So you can see the pre-pandemic quick turnaround and the pre-pandemic non-quick turnaround in the first two columns. And again, I won't drain the slides, but what I want to touch on really briefly is the enhanced turn clean, or clean for all turns, that was driven primarily and exclusively almost by the pandemic. So you can see some of those additional components that are added, IFE controls, the ESS departure spray, the recline buttons, the IFE controls that I already mentioned. But those additional surfaces that we really wanted to make sure we touched to drive the greatest level of safety for our customers and employees. The current process, as you can see, as I mentioned, right, we've eliminated that ESS, the electrostatic spray process, and have gone to a once per 7-day application. So that significant time savings and reduction in scope on a standard turn has allowed us to gain valuable minutes back in our operation and try and drive the ongoing continuity of our operation and on-time performance for customers, which above almost everything else is one of the most important things for them. And then actually our proposed, which we've implemented since this slide was built, proposed clean again on our quick turns. Because we have that application of the Zuno microbe shield, we're confident that the transmission risk is low to zero for our customers, and therefore, driving some reliability back into the operation and eliminating a handful of the cleaning tasks are not really driving that customer risk up. So as I talked about, the removal of electrostatic spraying is really kind of our first step in optimizing the cleaning mission. And I mentioned earlier the operational metrics and the importance of streamlining how we manage our cleaning process today. As you can see from an ESS standpoint, we're saving 5 to 6 minutes per turn, and that adds up over the course of an operational day to a lot of minutes. Additionally, estimated savings around close to $3 million in labor costs a month because we were able to eliminate the additional staff that we required to support the electrostatic spray application. Talked about the product evolution from the ESS initially and the disinfection product to the antimicrobial. And really in the end, right, on top of the savings that we had from eliminating the electrostatic spray per turn, the enhanced cleaning protocol, which we had implemented, shaved off an additional 5 to 10 minutes. So we're really in the neighborhood of 10 to 14 minutes that we're saving per aircraft turn, giving valuable time back to our operation and allowing for a greater continuity and greater service to our customers as a result of on-time performance. And that's it from me. I'll hand it over to Eva or Derek next.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, everyone.
So if I understand, while we remove or you remove the daily disinfection and you went towards to the coating, you are still doing it once in 7 days. Do you think it's gonna stay? That's new deep cleaning, and what you do in your company towards to future pandemics, future virus spread? Where do you think we are heading? Does it stay that way? That's the new norm?
Yeah, at least initial discussions is we really feel that's an important ongoing mitigation, whether it be COVID or whether it be the flu or anything else that could potentially be transmitted via surface. Our thought process is we really have it deeply ingrained and integrated into our daily operation now. We have the process down. We don't really see the operational impact at all. So from our perspective, there really is no cogent reason at this juncture for us to stop that practice. And I would imagine, keeping it in place should we have a recurrence of another strain or whatever else the case may be, not stopping and keeping that practice up versus having to ramp up again and acquire chemical and everything else just makes it a lot easier for us in the long run.
And is it the only thing which you are looking at, or are you exploring some other options or possibilities?
So from a cleaning standpoint, really just the ongoing and continuing analysis, and there's something I'll touch on, I think, towards the end as well. Really understanding the transmission risk from an aerosol perspective. The vast majority of documented COVID transmission cases have all been of an aerosol nature, so they're not necessarily surface. And I can go into more detail in a little bit on that piece.
Thank you. So with that, I would like to hand over to Derek to just show us the different side of it, because David and United, they faced with many flights. That's their challenge, or were their challenge, but Derek faced many customers.
Yeah, thank you, Eva. And David, great presentation there. So, for me, the other side on the ground handling, I didn't have as big a team and resources, so it was a lot more late nights of studying up and reading and different things like that. And like all at the beginning, I think we all started at the same point. Just a couple dates that I pulled out, looking back in all the notes that we took through this. For me in the States, January 20th was a key date, widespread news coverage. The 24th, U.S. Senate briefed, and then the 25th, I'll never forget for myself. So, all right, trying to get more information on this COVID. How do we get ahead of it? What can we do? What information do we have? And literally calling the CDC, an organization at, like WHO that I think highly of, and lots of great information, and calling and getting somebody on the other end, and literally the picture in my head was laminated pieces of paper and him flipping them over, and COVID, I don't have anything on COVID. So that was really the start for us, that we had a journey ahead of ourselves, from that point forward. So for us to get to the point of the disinfecting part, the ESS, fogging, any of those types of things, we felt we had to start with, getting assurance of our crew members, our front line, to be able to, do those things, to get that confidence in them that they were able to do it, and didn't have, fear of going out and doing this mission for us in disinfecting not only the aircraft, but also terminals and facilities that we were looking at as well. So, our pandemic team, rather than just a manual per se, we really look at, our key stakeholders within the company and organization, team member services to our CEO, really decision makers, that we could be nimble because things were happening just so quickly with it. One day information was, do it this way, and the next day something had changed, thermometers to make sure our team members were safe at the upline point before they got onto the airport, the field, or the aircraft kind of thing. So just some of the things that we did, again, just to get to that point, was to build up that confidence in our crew members to be able to do the task. Fogging and ESS, I know David had brought up a few different areas that they started with, and we did as well. For us, these were the mainstays, but a lot of it was customer driven. We had definitely some different perspectives, regardless of what publications that we might reference or go to or use, where our customers definitely were very strong-minded, one versus the other. And it could be a belief that one was better. Sometimes economics played a part into it. In some cases, it was just lead times on when we could start based on what was available to us. So just some of the things that we went through in these two options, again, our mainstay to get this project going, really. And that was just a starting point. Then it became, all right, what chemicals are we going to use? So beyond the lists and going through those chemicals, then it was, sourcing. Where can we get the chemical that we need? And, oh, by the way, is it going to actually do anything with COVID? So, again, a lot of debate and research internally, and then that's key part, sourcing, where we're going to get this chemical from. And I'm sure, like many, and even today, this was a quite often picture in our screens when we would go to get any of the components. So we had to get very creative on our side. I didn't have the buying power per se, so we would do a lot of regional sourcing of the components, buying the same things, but moving them from one area to the next, kind of thing. We didn't have that big buying power, and oftentimes this is what we encountered, and had to move supply around in order to meet the objective to get these aircraft or facilities disinfected. So once we did receive, everything that we needed, we knew the chemicals we were using with our customers, those items, whether the foggers, the sprayers, we needed the training aspect, built all that up in really a short period of time frame. Our units started arriving between the dates there, June 20th, whatnot. So, getting things in play, and then getting our teams out in the field trained and spooled up with this. Challenges and opportunities. We definitely went through this curve of consumer education, and for our frontline crews, the consumer education was flight crews, it was flight attendants, it was airport operators, it was sometimes our airline partner GMs, all that had become accustomed to this on-time machine and hurry up and let's do it now and what's taking so long. You know, they were accustomed to being able to get onto the access the aircraft. That might be a break period. That might be a sit down and relax kind of thing. And again, some of the areas that David had mentioned, but that re-education that, you know, oh yeah, there's this thing, contact time. We can't do it instantly. It's not just spray it on, put it on, and then it's done. But we have this contact time to, you know, assure that it's going to do its job and what we're trying to accomplish here and kill COVID. Innovations kept coming, so it wasn't just limited to the two, and throughout this process, even now, it seems like it's not all that hard to pick up, you know, some piece of literature on something new that's being tested. Some of the shortcomings with the devices themselves, be it foggers or sprayers, we saw some pretty creative, I would say, you know, reuses of items. Some of the backpack sprayers that we saw, it didn't seem like reliability was necessarily there, but there was definitely industry and some ingenuity in trying to reuse those and turn those into electrostatic sprayers that were, you know, on the shelf already and could be turned, put back into use right away versus having to wait for that supply chain to catch up. And some of the UV, a couple different pictures here, the UV items that came out that were at least taken a look at, along with anything that was new in the realm of COVID disinfection. So at peak, we were doing, in July roughly, we hit peak about almost 9,000 sprays a month. Again, that's both fogging and ESS sprays, aircraft and facilities, and that's where, you know, we really hit that high point. And, you know, really now, that's the current, for us at least, wind down on the COVID disinfection. So, you know, where are we at now? It's, you know, looking at it from, you know, is there an opportunities for recycling? We've got batteries, we've got foggers, we've got chemical that's been now starting to sit on shelves, you know, just deteriorating, so to speak. You know, recycling opportunities, disposal, proper disposal with the chemicals. In some cases, is a donation. Certain, you know, community facilities that, you know, again, I'd say David's point with, you know, prevention of flu or that type of thing that maybe want to carry on. But all that, you know, in a really short period of time to build up and spool up, and now kind of on the tail end, at least for, you know, us on the ground handler side from the disinfection, at least with these devices. So with that, Eva, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Derek. I can confirm that it was everyday new information and we learn on go. And you are very well aware that in IGOM we had very general section for aircraft cleaning. With COVID, we were asked what we do, so we had to rapidly get together, and the section 3.7 was extremely enhanced, and we took into account disinfection. Also, it was interesting to learn that Europe, for example, is very manual process oriented, so it's the apply and wipe, right, very manual on every place, time consuming, while North America was fogging, spraying, which in Europe no one uses much, right? So interesting approaches. Regulators, totally different approaches. US didn't regulate that much frequency, while Europe requested there needs to be aircraft disinfected every 6 hours on a long haul, and short haul was every 24 hours, which added complexity and cost to everyone. You said that you had a lot of challenges with getting the equipment and getting chemicals, Derek. The prices also increased, right? You were lucky to have some, I know, before COVID, but we cannot talk prices here, but in percentage, duplicate or more, huh?
Yeah, I mean, the prices in just trying to, acquire and having some of the conversations in seemingly just a short span of time where, some of these suppliers would say, just weeks ago, I could barely give this thing away. No one would believe me that it was great. And yeah, now, supply has dwindled and the price has skyrocketed. And then fast forward to now, I mean, some of the suppliers that we have that seemingly almost just were pop-ups because of it. They saw a need, have no customers now and are being forced out, and it's just a fire sale at a fraction of the cost that the market was buying.
And in terms of your preparation for the next, we continuously hear the next is coming, right? We were not out of one, and we already hear about next one. So let's say it's unavoidable. We don't know where. You said it was difficult to get chemicals, difficult to get equipment, right? Are you sucking up, or what is the strategy in your company?
We're not stocking up, I would say. We've got to be very nimble in everything that we do as a company. And definitely stock up, I would not say is something we're due, but definitely keeping an eye on what's going on to try and be in a better position and know that we have to make quick decisions, in the event of something like this. Otherwise, we'll face ourselves in the same situation.
So my next question would be, and I have to figure out what is the next question. What do you think is a takeaway from this one, right? For your company and general for industry? Because from a short time, a lot have happened. We have learned a lot. But sometimes I feel that now we are relaxed, so we just kind of put it somewhere as it didn't happen, right? And then 5 years from now, we will be surprised again. And so do you have the same feeling, or what is the takeaways for us as a company and industry?
I mean, for me, I felt everybody was on the same level playing field, just like that first, even CDC, that first phone call. But what really was, I think, beneficial was the industry came together, just the networking, the collaboration, a lot of these things. I easily could reach out to, not only airline customers and sharing things back and forth, but also even competitors on, any supply type of thing. We had some that said, hey, do you need this? We've got this here. So that collaboration, I mean, I had a family, so to speak, with the different groups that we participated on and building that network. So you had go-tos, and it worked both ways. We definitely took a lot because somebody provided information. We definitely were trying to be as transparent and give a lot as well. I think going forward, whatever the next one is, if there is, I think, that ability and knowledge that we're all in it together, and that collaborative mindset of this industry will push us. And I think we'll be better set up because of this, that way.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, and I think I'll echo really, and I had some stats I really wanted to just quickly touch on as well, kind of Derek's comments relative to the collaboration, right? I think one thing that's really evident to me throughout the pandemic is that when it comes to safety, we are not competitors, we're collaborators. And so I think that was huge. And I anticipate and know that anytime if we do encounter another situation where safety is on the line, that we will continue those great relationships that we've built. I think one of the other takeaways for me, and apologies as I reference my notes here, some of it's fairly technical. One of the things that we learned throughout is that viruses are primarily transmitted via air, right? The surface transmission is really not all that common. So we actually partnered with the US government and the US military actually on a study of what that air circulation looks like on board an aircraft. And it's roughly 50% fresh air and 50% recirculated air that's in an aircraft cabin. And the interesting piece is it flows out through vents towards the top of the aircraft, and actually the intake vents that pull the air back out are towards the floor. So there's this constant downward pressure of airflow on board an aircraft. And surprisingly, which this statistic was amazing to me, cabin air on an average aircraft exchanges between 20 and 30 times per hour, which means every 2 to 3 minutes, the air on board an aircraft in an aircraft environment is completely refreshed. And which is more frequent, frankly, than other bigger spaces, even more so than most hospitals, as far as that air refresh and that air exchange. And the recirculated air actually goes, at least on all of our aircraft, through HEPA filters. And those filter out 99.97%, which is an amazing statistic to me, of any airborne particles, to include virus. So really, after that 2 to 3 minute period, there's a 0.03 chance that viral matter that was previously, added to the environment is reduced and removed out. And that was both with APU operations, so pushing air through the onboard aircraft systems, as well as with ground air. So really, I think from my end, extremely encouraging, right? Should we have a recurrence? Having done that research and participated with the US military in that study, the likelihood of transmission in an onboard environment is really extremely, extremely low. So I think that's, something that we can continue to help the public understand and something that we can rely on in the future. And I did see the question there, if you don't mind, Eva, just really quickly. Yeah. We do have, so relative to how we're tracking electrostatic spray activities, we have an internal kind of system that tracks all of our aircraft eventing, whether that be on, off, door open, door closed, et cetera. So it's actually a manual add to that system. And they're timers for every aircraft, so when it's gone beyond that 7-day period, we actually get active alerting to help drive immediate application of the antimicrobial coating.
Thank you. And there is a question for Derek. From handle point of view, how did you manage different customers' regulatory requirements, especially in the early stage of the pandemic?
Yeah, so at the early stage, unfortunately, just what COVID did to the reduction in staff, it was me. So what I did was work with our customers right off the get-go on what type of process they required, any documentation, and it did vary. So we established a tracking on that repository, and then as we built back up, then that became added into our QA side that's on my team. So able to look at from that process, but very close to our counterparts at the airline that were working on this. So if there was a question, we were very easy, just a phone call to reach out if there was a question or anything that needed clarification.
Thank you very much. We are pretty much on a time. We manage on time. So I have last question. Do you think we are ready for the next one?
Yeah, from United's perspective, I would say absolutely yes. I think the learnings that we've acquired during the pandemic and the collaboration we've had with our various partners, whether that be ground handling service providers or government regulatory agencies, U.S. military, et cetera, I think we've learned a ton. And I feel like we're absolutely in a good place and are ready should this happen again.
Derek, do you think handlers are ready?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that the confidence is totally there, but I think that the learning steps that we took in the collaboration, things like that I think we're as best prepared as we could going into it on knowing, timeline quickly to move and do. So
thank you very much. I'm glad to end up on positive note. Sometimes I'm wondering, but I'm happy that you are reassuring me. With that, I would like to join me to give a round of applause for our speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.